Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Office Hours as part of SportTokz with Sport Profs. I'm Dan Berlin, and today I'm joined weekly, as I usually am, with Sportsnet.ca feature writer David Singh, and a very special guest today, also from Sportsnet. It is a senior producer of original digital content for Sportsnet, none other than Graeme Campbell. Graeme, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Hopefully I can impart, at least a couple nuggets of wisdom here for everybody, and happy to be on with you.
Well, listen, we appreciate it in a pandemic. You trimmed the beard. You're looking good.
Yeah.
Thanks for cleaning yourself up for us. Hey,
Yeah, at least from this height up,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, obviously in introducing you, a bit of a mouthful, senior producer, original digital content. Tell us a little bit about your role at Sports.
Sure. Well, Dan, so my role is actually about a year and a half years old at this point. So basically, about a year and a half ago, Sportsnet started this original digital video content department. And basically, I think it was something that was, missing a bit from Sportsnet's vast portfolio of content, and something that clearly they recognized as an area of focus, given where we are in the industry, and given that it is a medium that is only growing and a big future of our industry. So basically, I was brought over. I was actually at the Blue Jays, so go Jays. I'm not sure when this is airing exactly, but hopefully they're still in the mix. I was a digital content specialist for them, and then essentially just this department came about at Sportsnet. I was reached out to, something that really kind of fit my strengths and the area of expertise I've kind of gone over the last 5 years or so. So I pounced at the opportunity. It's a small team right now as we kind of continue to build, but I think a small team with big dreams, and we've done a lot given everything that's gone on over the last year and a half. I think we've done a lot of new innovative content that hopefully some of your students have seen across our Sportsnet digital properties. We do a lot of content that lives everywhere, and that's, I'm sure we'll get into it a bit here, but it's a unique position because digital content is such a vast term. It can mean so many different things, and whether it's the social landscape, Sportsnet.ca or YouTube, in terms of longer form video content. So there's a lot of different kind of areas that we live in, but it's something that I think is an exciting opportunity, something I definitely have been enjoying and look to keep building on. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful there, but yeah, we do quite a bit of different content, and it kind of is specific to what the objective is, the platform, priorities of the network at the time, things like that. There's kind of a lot behind all those decisions, but yeah, that's kind of my summary, I guess, of where I live right now. So
Graeme, you mentioned if our students would be familiar with your work. I think they are. We had Donovan on a couple of weeks ago as a guest speaker, nice. And we talked about the Austin Matthews Mexican restaurant feature.
Yeah,
and I'm sure a few students pulled that up. That was, as we talked about on that podcast, and as you and I have talked about in the Sportsnet newsroom, that was a beautiful piece of content. In your mind, what makes for good digital content? What's the kind of criteria that you employ?
So it's again, the question is so vast. When I say that, it depends on so many factors. So I'll try and kind of summarize some things that I think of, at least philosophically, when we're trying to knock something out of the park or do quality content on a consistent basis. So a lot of it is just, it all kind of comes for me from objectives. Like, what are your objectives with this project? Is it to get as many views as possible? Is it to get a high amount of engagement? Is it to get reach? Is it to, there's all of these kind of KPIs that come with digital content, and it's really about, evaluating what it is you're looking to accomplish, setting KPIs for yourself in a sense that, like, I don't want to use that like acronym in a flashy way, but it really is super true in the sense that, to me, good digital content is if you've set out to do something and you hit your KPIs on it, that's a good piece of digital content. So that can happen in so many different ways. That can happen in ways that, like I said, those kind of prerequisites that I mentioned, if it's something that resonates with your audience and you get clearly, like, so how about this? I'll put a kind of a specific example to paper here for us. And this, you speak of Donovan. We did a essay around on Canada Day. Canada Day is normally free agent frenzy, for those that know that in the sports world. And so normally that is the day it's dominated by that topic. That was not the case this year, obviously, with everything happened with the NHL pause and all of that. So I did recognize that this was a day that would normally be, flooded and dedicated to NHL free agency, but it wasn't this time. This was also in the midst, and as we continue to deal with, the social justice movement that has taken place over the last, 6 months or so. Something that we've really seen come to the forefront in the media landscape. And it was an opportunity that I saw where I contacted Donovan to do this essay, something that we've collaborated on, what feels like 100 times. We do these one of my favorite pieces of work that I do actually at the network are these essays with Donovan, because, he's obviously incredibly talented in his own right. We've known each other for a long time. We mesh up quite well with a lot of, just our beliefs and thoughts around, content in general, work in general. So I contacted him about this piece, knowing that this would only be really able to happen this one year, because, like I said, if it wasn't for the NHL being on pause, we would all be, the cavalry would be free agent frenzy exclusively. So since that wasn't happening, I contacted Donovan and said, I think this is an opportunity for us to do a really thoughtful piece on Canada, on social injustice within Canada. Obviously a lot of what we see takes place in the United States, and that's a big focal point. But as everybody should know, we're not immune to these things in Canada. So I thought that it would be an opportunity to do something super meaningful that could be really impactful on our channels. And it was. We essentially just did this kind of really poignant, "Oh, Canada, while we celebrate our great country, we also need to reflect on the ways that we can get better, through sport, through community, various kind of ways," right? So that was something that we recognized as an opportunity to break through in on this important conversation, and how do we do it? So we put this, what I thought was a beautiful piece together. A lot of thought went into it, knowing that people would be really, like, again, on Canada Day, typically you see a lot of celebration of our country and things of that nature, which is obviously great in its own right. But this was a Canada Day that was kind of like none before, that people had been recognizing these important conversations that were taking place. So it was identifying the moment. It was identifying kind of this moment in time where this piece of content could really translate. So it's those kind of things where it's like, it's a lot of it kind of comes from knowing your audience, knowing the storylines that are taking place in the world, knowing how you can get in on those topics in a meaningful way that will translate to your audience. I know that's kind of hot, like,
Right.
it's a little philosophical. Yeah, Dan,
Graeme,
go ahead, please.
We talk to our students all the time. Like, the first nugget you have to focus on is knowing your audience. Like,
yeah,
you can't sit down and start producing a piece of content or writing a story unless you know who you're writing it for specifically.
Yeah. Yep.
So I totally subscribe to what you're saying there. I think it's crucial, and I think everything that you talk about is really, what ultimately factors in. It's having your fingers on the pulse of what people want to know about, what they're interested in, and knowing how to tap into that. And I think, yeah. You do it in a
Exactly that,
young and
Dan.
fresh and a creative way. Try to tell that
Yep.
story differently than anyone's told it.
And that's what that was. I think it was exactly that. I won't dwell on it too much longer, but it was basically kind of knowing as you just said, Dan, knowing your audience is half, if not, the majority of the battle before you even start a concept. So, David, I know your original question was what makes for good digital content. I think it's hard to say because there's so many ways to execute, but it's knowing it's setting yourself up for success. It's knowing your audience, knowing your channels, knowing your distribution, best practices, all of those things, right? And then I think if you follow those constructs and philosophies enough, you'll produce good digital content. You'll produce good content, period.
And what's interesting? Sorry, Dave.
Go ahead.
Just as a question there to follow that up, Graeme, much of what you're talking about and kind of describing here in many cases is a pretty advanced strategy, certainly at your level, to how you're looking to approach digital content. My question, I guess, then for you would be, listen, for students who just kind of want to get started, and you use the term KPI, key performance indicators, like, which is great, but like to even simplify, what's a KPI that a young student who's looking to start whether it be their own YouTube channel or looking to develop a little social media strategy, that don't really know how to get started, where should their focus really be on to begin?
Yeah, I think that's obviously a very good question, Dan, and one that I think, to me, there is arguably no more complex medium than digital content, because there's just so many factors involved in terms of with TV and linear content. I'm a huge TV junkie, but it's one traditional kind of distribution method, and it's been something that's tried and true for a long time. With digital, things are constantly evolving. They're constant. Platforms are constantly evolving. Audience habits are constantly evolving. So I do think that educating yourself is kind of the first step, I would say, Dan. Like really hitting the books in terms of learning about all of the different digital platforms, the user behaviors within there's tons of kind of documentation out there and studies and research and things behind all of these platforms, whether it's Insta or Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or whatever. There's tons of data and best practices and things like that's the starting point for me, honestly. Like anybody can put a story together or slap a feature together that is a good story, but if it's not formatted properly, if it's not distributed properly, you're not going to succeed. And we see that constantly, I find, in digital content in the industry. Is just because something is a good piece of content, it doesn't mean that it will translate on the specific platform or that objective that I spoke of, those KPIs. So, and I know it's kind of a tricky and tangible, but to me, it's honestly learning as much as you can about the various platforms, or the one that you're looking to. If you're looking to start a YouTube channel, you better dig into that channel for hours and research what makes people successful, what has made people successful over time on those channels. There's tons of documentation and statistics that can set you up for success. So that would be kind of a starting point for me, for any student that's looking to break into the digital world. Is there's so much noise and content overload in this medium that if you're not doing it correctly or setting yourself up for some success from the beginning, it's going to be over before you even started. So that's kind of I think that's my first one, is learning the landscape as much as you can, and then strategizing how to tell your story based on those things.
Interesting. David.
Yeah, when you're scouring for new talent or on the lookout for, younger people who are making digital content, how much attention are you paying to how different they are from a style perspective, from a presentation perspective, and how they look on and operate on screen?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, and again, I think it's dependent on the channel or the brand, right? So that's kind of something, David, you know me, and we've talked about how I love personality in on-air personalities. Like, there's a lot of talk. Again, we use the word talking head. I'm not trying to say that in a negative fashion, but there's a lot of people that do that in the industry, on TV, on digital, on everything. And obviously that has its purpose and everything, but there's so much of it that, for me, I am always looking for something fresh and unique, something that will break through the noise. I say that term a lot, and probably will throughout the course of this conversation. But breaking through the noise is something that is so vital in a place where, there's no sugarcoating the fact that it's such an oversaturated medium, because everybody can contribute. Whether you do it well is a completely different story. And I think, we see, I'll give some examples just from my end. Personalities that I really like at Sportsnet, for instance, are people that I've collaborated with in terms of the Faisal Khamisas of the world, the Dan Shows of the world, the Donovan Bennett's of the world. They offer like a brand into themselves, and it's something that I think is essential in terms of kind of establishing yourself, if that's the angle you're looking to go. If you're looking to do on-camera work within this landscape, I think you do need to create a brand for yourself, have a very energetic, fun personality, things like that will, again, as I've said, kind of break through the noise of a platform or of a medium that has so much going on.
And just as a follow-up to that, so I mean, personality is a big part of this. What are some of the other skills that you seek when you're looking for, it could be on the producing side, behind the scenes, or in front of the camera, in addition to personality?
Sure. The thing that I think is super important with roles in the digital landscape is versatility. I think it's something that we've kind of come into an era of content creators. You hear that word, that title used very often in different ways. Content creators, it can mean so many different things, and this would be from a production. Actually, no, this would be production and on air. It doesn't necessarily just mean one of them. I think it's having the skill set and the knowledge to just know content creation. So I would say, to be specific, diversity of skill sets in terms of whether it's Photoshop, Premiere, editing, things like that. Having as much well-rounded skills as you can to create meaningful content is very important. So I think that's something. It's a tough industry to be really good at just one thing. I think that's something. I think that for me, and often also because I think the reality of a lot of digital media brands is it's still, we've been here for a long time, but it's still in the, I don't want to say startup phases, because it shouldn't be, and we've been here long enough, but it's still something that people are learning, and companies and brands are just kind of realizing that they need to be involved in. And I think to make yourself so sorry, I know that was a bit of a ramble. I think my point there is that if you have a diverse skill set in an area that is going to task you with likely doing a lot of different things, or having your hand in a lot of different areas, that's an important thing to me, is just being well-rounded as much as you can, knowing as much about content creation and the bigger picture, right? Like, that's something that I think the benefit of over time is just the various roles I've done in my career, that when you start an idea, every step along the way, and you can visualize from the concept to whether it's a Photoshop project or an edit, and how do we format that properly for the right distribution on this specific channel, and all those things. So that's kind of my point, that I think just being as well-rounded and having a versatile skill set is super important in the digital world, especially probably coming right out of school. I would think, the more ammo you have, the more things you can say, I can add value to, is only going to benefit.
One skill you didn't mention is my favorite skill, writing.
Yes.
So how important is it for a student who maybe just only wants to be on camera? That's their only goal in life, or even work behind the scenes of a camera. How important are writing skills for that individual?
Incredibly important. I think that's just something that is, whether it's just the essentials of journalism, or writing poignant and punchy social copy that will actually catch people's attention and things like that. It's incredibly important. I spoke to, like, that those are one of those things, David. And again, while I am a visual consumer and expert, quote unquote, I love to read and I have an appreciation for writing, and also the role it plays just in storytelling, period. Storytelling is still going to be the key of any quality content. That was something I didn't mention off the top when we were talking about what makes for digital content, but I think because it goes without saying, storytelling is an essential part of that. When I talk about those Donovan pieces that I mentioned earlier, that Canada Day piece, the writing is essential to the success, and something that makes Donovan so skilled and makes your features and big reads what they are, is because of the talent there. And I think that it's just an essential quality, and something that can make a piece of content from good to great, even if you're on air, as you kind of specifically said that, David. The words that are coming from your mouth, whether you're writing them on paper, or thinking them through in your head, or freestyling, for lack of a better word, that still will only get better through quality of writing and just improving that skill set. And I did mention the social copy element because I think that is a really underrated part of the digital industry, the social industry to be specific, is that social copy is hugely important to the success of any piece of content, and it can actually make or break pieces of content. You could have a beautiful video feature that you've done, and if you don't have the proper accompanying social copy that is well written, that is captivating, that is going to translate to your audience, that piece won't succeed. So it is essential. It's an essential component, I think, still, David. Even again, saying I'm the video guy, it's still it's incredibly important to that medium as well, because it's the art of storytelling through words, whether it's spoken or written. I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
I totally agree, and I think to David's original question, this foundational skill of good writing.
Yeah.
If you we once had Ken Reed from Sportsnet on
Yeah.
the show, and he said, "My job is it's a writing job. I just bring those words to life." So
and for sure, Dan, and that's kind of what like even whether it's highlights, like that's a common role for students right out of school, is these positions within highlight operations at our various sports networks in the city, and that will come with writing a catchy and fun and entertaining script that goes with that highlight pack. And it's also something where you can really make a brand for your writing and things like that will like, that's something, just to be kind of specific, I'm getting very specific here, but you can I was at the Score a long time ago when it was still a network before Sportsnet purchased them, and something that was just universally outstanding, in my opinion, at that network was their highlight writing. And we had this thing called the Wheel. For those, the kids, the students, sorry, may not remember those days, but because it was almost 6, 7, 8 years ago. But it was beloved by sports fans, watching these entertaining, fun, well written highlights. Right, like that. It's an essential component for sure.
Yeah. And just to sort of pick off, you were starting to talk about social copy, because I know your background, you also worked on Sportsnet's social media team, so you have a great background in social. Maybe you could share, some tips, some do's and don'ts as it relates to social and that medium, in terms of good practices and maybe some things you really kind of want to stay away from.
Yeah, for sure, Dan. So, it is something that I think it's kind of per channel specific, and that's where I do say is is knowing each channel as well as you can is so important. You know, Twitter, you have whatever the 280 characters it is now, and I would certainly say you never want to take up all 280 of those. You have to kind of, I think, just again, when I said there is a lot of like best practices that go into all of these platforms, that's one specifically, is just knowing that I'm always a subscriber of short is sweet on social when it comes to copy specifically. I think just, you know, being a really thoughtful and eloquent in the way that you present a caption along with a good piece of content is something that will always stand out to me. In terms of do's and don'ts, Dan, I would say the biggest thing and the biggest mistakes that we see, this is more of a video and content side of things versus the copy specifically, but it's all encompassing. And this is hugely important. I can't really kind of overstate that, is just formatting content natively for the platform. Knowing all of those, like, so, right, like Instagram, you're going to have square content, or if it's 9:16, if you're doing Insta stories or IGTV content, putting, you know, this is stuff that we used to see constantly, whether like in the early kind of days of the social content rise, was someone putting a like letterboxed 16:9 video on an Instagram page. That looks terrible and is a blatant acknowledgement that you don't know the best practices for this platform, that your brand doesn't know the best practices for this platform. So that's something, is formatting of content is one of the most important things for me, in terms of the various, and that's also length of content. You know, on YouTube, you have longer form video because people go to that platform specifically to watch video. So you can go the 6 to 8 minute range, even longer with documentaries and things that are on there. I'm just kind of speaking in averages, versus Twitter. It is a news service platform. It is an instant information platform. People don't go to that platform to watch a 10-minute feature or a 10-minute interview. Whether you want to put a 30-second, beautiful, like well-packaged tease to your bigger piece on YouTube and tweet out the link, that's how you need to be thinking with all of these channels. So that would be the biggest do's and don'ts, is just don't know the different best practices and formats for these different channels, and do everything you can to stay on course with those things. As kind of those specifics I mentioned, like in terms of, sorry, I got my cat Pablo rolling up on me here, so he's trying to get in on the talk. Anyways, those would be kind of like just adhering to those best practices and knowing the best way to optimize content on those platforms is so important.
And it comes back to what you said earlier, you know, do your research and know what you're doing when you're
for sure
providing content for that. David?
Yeah, Graeme, you mentioned earlier that you worked for the Jays, and it's a cool job. I know I used to see you at the ballpark all the time. And that's something that I think students might not know exists, that, you know, on one hand, they can work at the big companies in journalism. They can work at Sportsnet or TSN or the Toronto Star or wherever, but an opportunity also exists within actual teams. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us the difference from your perspective on working for a media outlet versus an actual sports franchise.
Yeah, absolutely, David. That's a really good point. And, you know, I can even take it a step further after I give you the initial answer to your question. And that is exactly it, David. So it was a learning curve for me when I went to the Blue Jays. It was the first time that I worked for a brand, like a brand. You know, that's kind of how I immediately, you know, had to think of this, is that when you're on the media side of things, there's always going to be a bounty of storylines, and you can, you know, whether it's critique or praise or things of that nature, there's just so many different angles and stories you can talk about. With a brand, obviously that's not going to be the exact case, right? Like if I'm working for the Blue Jays, I'm not going to come up with some piece of content that is criticizing a bad month by Vlad Jr., right? Like that's just obviously super counterproductive for the brand. So I would say that's the biggest difference is, one, you become almost more of a, business marketing component in terms of that. Those sports teams are brands with huge fan bases and huge stakeholders and sponsors. And there's just so many things that you're probably going to be involved with and representing, and in an amazing way. That's something that I would say to your students is that obviously, being on the media side is plenty of fun in its own right. Working for a team or a brand is also still an amazing opportunity, and one that will broaden your horizons in terms of just those like business, like the business of that brand and sport. That was something that was really beneficial to my career, was my time at the Blue Jays, learning about marketing, learning about a brand, learning about all of the values that, because I would say that all of these teams, when I talk about objectives, they have them. They have them, like they need to have those objectives because it's going to sell them tickets, it's going to get sponsors, it's going to do all of those things. So how do you deliver on those objectives? It was an amazing experience that I wouldn't trade, because it was super beneficial just to my overall knowledge on business and marketing and things that have helped me bring that mentality back to Sportsnet, which is a brand as well. I guess I would kind of finish with the point there that marketing is also something that I have an interest in, because it is essentially what we are doing. Like, we are marketing our content, we're marketing our on-air talent, we're marketing our stories, and how you market that and create some sense of brand affinity and recognition is super important. So that's another thing with social digital content. It all comes down to distribution at the end of the day, and how you're distributing that to your audience, and whether it's going to resonate. And that's marketing at its kind of core to some extent. So, working for teams or brands, you will get a lot of that knowledge, and something that I think is very relevant to sports, to media, to selling stories, all of those kind of things I just rattled off, David.
Well, really, honestly, Graeme, like incredible insights, because it begins with obviously this ability to produce quality, right? Through good writing, good practices, understanding the various tools that a young, content creator needs, whether it be
Yeah.
the Adobe suite of products or the ability to do video editing and be versatile. And then also just have purpose, going into this content creation, understanding the various platforms, understanding the channels, with an eye for how we can resonate this content through marketing means with our audience. And that's sort of the idea phase right through to the distribution phase. And you have to almost have the vision for the entire thing, not just the story itself.
You absolutely do, Dan. And you summarized kind of probably what was, the last 20 minutes of my rambles way more eloquently than I could. But that's
just wrapping it up.
But you did that quite well. And that is exactly it. I couldn't have summarized it better, Dan. It's something that, it's such a, as I said, when I said at the beginning of kind of our conversation, the vastness of the digital medium, you just need to be really knowledgeable in as many different facets as you can, from ideation to distribution. And that's exactly kind of what you just summarized there. So that is very, very important for anyone that's going to succeed in this industry.
And I appreciate that, but this is all coming from you. And I think the other takeaway between legacy media like TV and even radio, because you were one of the few gatekeepers, you didn't necessarily have to worry about distribution as much, because you had built-in audiences and there were fewer choices. So that part of it almost took care of itself. Now you, without question, have to have one eye on the bigger picture here and how this is going to resonate. Because as you put it, you're trying to bust through the noise here. And the only way you can do it is to have a really sound strategy. Well, listen, why don't we leave it there? Listen, our time.
Absolutely.
Graeme, unbelievable to have you here. I mean, some great advisement for, our students, advice that they can use. and get themselves started in their own journey. Listen, thank you on behalf of Office Hours and the SportTokz team, and as well from the RTA group and the journalism school as well. We really appreciated having you today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dan, David. I hope this provides, even a bit of nugget of value to your students. It was a good conversation, I think. So thank you for having me.
Solid gold would be that nugget. Go ahead, David. Well, listen, White, on behalf of David and myself, David Singh from Sportsnet feature writer Dan Berlin here. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this Office Hours as a division of SportTokz with Sport Profs, and we will see you next time.